Imagine this. Someone comes up to you and says, "See this part of your head? That's melancholy. This side is conspiracy theories. And this corner is sticking out because you've watched too many TV shows." You'd probably laugh, right? But in the 1800s, people took this very seriously. They dressed up reading character from the shape of the skull as science. They even gave it a fancy name, phrenology. In other words, they claimed they could measure what kind of person you were from the bumps and dents on your skull. This area is courage, this one is faith, this is guilt, that one is romance, and so on. From today's perspective, it's funny. But back then, this fake science was even used in hiring decisions. Now, in our imagination, I'm picking up one of those heads and putting it on the table right here, exactly here. A bust that looks like a real head, but with fake maps drawn all over it. And I'm saying this, if we think we can map the human mind this easily, one day, someone will step forward and say, if the mind can be mapped, then it can be controlled too. And Pluribus is exactly a series about this. It's a story that starts in the age of these fake mind maps and stretches all the way to today's world. A world that's trying to truly map our brains, turn our emotions into data, and align our thoughts with algorithms. And the person telling this story is a mind we all know, Vince Gilligan, the man who created Breaking Bad and then Better Call Saul. This time, he's back with Pluribus, streaming on Apple TV. And when you watch the first episode, you really feel this. This guy has decided to put the human mind on the table once again, and this time, he's going all the way down into brain chemistry. In this video, we're going to enter this new world together. But first, as always, we'll follow a two-step path. In the first part, a spoiler-free explanation for those who haven't watched the show at all. What is Pluribus about? Who is Carol? And why does happiness turn into something dangerous here? In the second part, we'll step into the spoiler zone together with those who have watched it. What does the signal from space actually symbolize? What is the metaphor behind the collective consciousness? And how similar is that scene where everyone shares the same feeling to what we are living through today with AI and social media? If you're ready, let's first put this bus somewhere calm and start rediscovering the inside of our heads through Vince Gilligan's world. Pluribus is categorized as science fiction, but it's not sci-fi in the classic sense of spaceships and laser guns. This show walks that narrow line where science meets philosophy and psychology meets technology. We can summarize it briefly like this. A signal from space reaches Earth. When scientists decode this signal, what they see is not the usual star map or machine blueprint. It's a kind of biological instruction, an RNA sequence. They create something from this sequence in the lab, and then things spiral out of control. And at some point, we see this. Humanity starts to turn into a single collective consciousness. Everyone becomes connected. Everyone feels everyone else's emotions. Everyone, at least from the outside, looks peaceful, calm, happy, and harmonious. Sounds utopian, doesn't it? No war, no fighting, no loneliness. Everyone has become one. But there's a small detail. This state of being one wipes out free will. And this is exactly where the title of the series comes in. Pluribus, a word derived from the famous US motto, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. In other words, many minds, one consciousness. Our main character, Carol, is one of the rare people who cannot join this new order. While everyone is connecting to this happiness network, she can't. So our story is told, ironically, through the most unhappy person in the world. To sum it up, the key sentence you can keep in mind from this first part might be this. Pluribus is a series that questions the idea that happiness might not be our salvation, but our surrender. Normally, there are many works that deal with this kind of topic. Black Mirror episodes, dystopian sci-fi stories, collective mind narratives. But what makes Pluribus different is this. It's character-driven. Vince Gilligan, as always, tells the big idea through a single human first. Here, that human is Carol. There's a subtle layer of humor. The show talks about something very heavy, but decorates it with moments of absurdity and dark comedy. Classic Gilligan touch. Its world building is very layered. A signal from space, Kepler 22b, RNA, scientific details, social media references, AI hints. All of these come together in a single metaphor. Humanity turning into one mind. If you haven't watched the show yet and you're curious up to this point, it might be a good idea to pause now, go watch at least the first 2 episodes, and then come back. Because from here on, starting with part 3, we're entering the spoiler zone. I'm really warning you, if you've never watched the show and you plan to, stop the video now, watch the series, then come back. If you're ready, let's continue. The show begins with an opening that will feel very familiar to fans of the movie Contact the Giant Radio Telescopes in New Mexico. A rhythmic signal coming from deep space, scientists staring at the screen, asking, "What is this?" But here, there's an important difference. In Contact, the message was a machine blueprint. In Pluribus, what arrives is a biological code. This is critical, because this time the aliens aren't saying, "Build this machine and come meet us," but instead, create this thing and let it function inside your own bodies. The signal is decoded. 4 tones, 4 bases. Guanine, adenine, cytosine, uracil, an RNA sequence, which means I've sent you the recipe I need in order to express myself inside your cells. Scientists test this in the lab, and the first transmission happens through a bite. Mouse, human. Then we see what this entity does. First, it settles into the individual's brain, then it connects them to others, and finally, it turns all of humanity into a single network. This process of joining the network is called join in the series. In other words, to join, to merge. During the join process, heart rate drops, consciousness becomes blurry. There's a brief loss of consciousness, and then the person wakes up, feeling amazing. This becomes the new standard of the world. Did you join? If you did, you're one of us now. If you didn't, then the problem is you. Now, let's get to Carol Sturka. Carol is one of the few people who cannot connect to this collective consciousness. In the show, these people are called immune. When we look at Carol's life, she writes pirate-themed fantasy novels. She hates even her own writing. She's not happy with her life, constantly complaining, angry, cynical, impatient. So she's not a hero in the traditional sense at all. In fact, in the first episodes, a lot of people might be thinking, really? This is the person who's supposed to save the world? But this contrast is exactly what Gilligan loves. In Breaking Bad, we watched a good man slowly turn bad. Here, we're watching someone who is unhappy, hurt, cynical, and seeing her placed in front of maybe the most critical test in human history, Carol actually represents a question. In this new world, could staying unhappy be a form of resistance? Because if everyone is peacefully happy by force, if no one fights, if everyone feels each other's emotions, then anger, sadness, loneliness, indecision, shame, all of them start to look like system errors. Carol represents that error, and that's why she is both dangerous and maybe the most human character of all. In the first episodes, we learn that there are others like Carol who are immune, a total of 13 people, and we see some of them in a special meeting. All of them are disconnected from the rest of the world. While the world is living in collective happiness, they're in a room asking, "So, what do we do now?" There's a beautiful irony here. As viewers, we expect this. Yes, they'll band together and decide to save humanity. But that's not what happens. Some of them really like the new order. One says, thanks to this system, there's no war, no hunger, no racism. Why ruin it? Another doesn't want to give up the power and comfort they've gained. Someone else thinks, my kids are no longer the kids I knew, but at least they're alive. So the show shows us this. Even escaping a good-looking dystopia is not something everyone will agree on. At this point, Carol is left alone, because she's the only one who truly carries that feeling of, something is wrong with this system. Maybe she can't explain it rationally, but she knows it intuitively, and this is a very familiar feeling in today's world. Everyone seems very happy with something, but inside you, a quiet voice keeps saying, there's something wrong here. Pluribus is a show that takes that inner voice seriously. One of the strongest sides of Pluribus is that it doesn't just tell us about something that might happen in the future. It also enlarges what is happening today. Right now, we're already living prototypes of this collective mind. Crowds swept up in the same outrage on social media, trends, dances, challenges that spread in an instant. Hundreds of people laughing at the same thing, getting angry at the same thing in a single day. The sentence, everyone is talking about this. Our emotions have already been turning into data for a while now. Advertising companies, social media platforms, analytics firms, political campaigns, all of them measure our feelings, which news we stare at longer, which videos we laugh at, where we stop and replay. Pluribus simply adds one more step to this. We're no longer just reading your data. We're changing your feelings collectively before you even get the chance to object. And this leads us to the show's most frightening question. If you can't tell whether what you feel actually belongs to you, how can you understand who you are? Now let's talk a bit about the visual world of the show. Pluribus doesn't just speak through its story. It also says something with its cinematography, color palette, and framing. You may have noticed, the colors are very soft, pastel. Shots are extremely orderly, symmetrical. The spaces look like they're straight out of a catalog. At first glance, living in this world looks nice, clean, tidy, colorful, peaceful. But as the episode goes on, this order starts to feel suffocating because the human eye looks for flaws. It looks for mistakes. It wants to see something that hasn't been controlled. The visual language of Pluribus seems to constantly send this message. Everything is this neat, because you are not. You are the only piece that doesn't fit this symmetry. This perfectly mirrors Carol's inner world. She stands like a broken note in this perfect world. And that's why the story, both aesthetically and narratively, keeps asking the same question. If perfection excludes the human being, is it really a good thing? In interviews, Vince Gilligan openly says he doesn't like artificial intelligence. This isn't just a technology is advancing issue for him. For him, AI triggers this question. If these systems do all our work for us, what will be left that makes life worth living? Pluribus doesn't directly set AI as its main topic, but underneath, there's a mind outside the mind that strongly resembles artificial intelligence. Think about it. The collective mind knows every individual's emotions. It balances tensions, smooths feelings out. It stops conflict before it begins. It drags people's reactions toward the average. This is a kind of emotion algorithm. And the purpose of this algorithm is keep the system as stable, peaceful, and predictable as possible. What does social media do to us today? Pretty much exactly this. It blocks extreme content, recommends content that won't disturb you too much, tries to manage radical emotions, but does all this by trapping you inside a bubble. Pluribus is the extreme tip of this algorithmic calm. Now everyone feels the same thing. No conflict, no debate, no surprise. But what about meaning? In my opinion, the strongest thing about Pluribus is this. After watching it, you don't just say, nice show. Instead, these kinds of questions start to settle in your mind. How do I really feel? Do my feelings truly belong to me? Or are they the product of all the content, algorithms, and trends I'm constantly exposed to? Do I have to be happy all the time? Are sadness, anger, vulnerability really bugs that need to be fixed? Or are they part of being human? If everyone laughs at the same thing, gets mad at the same thing, watches the same shows, Does anything like a me remain? Vince Gilligan told the moral collapse of a single man in Breaking Bad. In Pluribus, we're watching something else. A society quietly losing its identity under a system that looks well-intentioned. That's why Pluribus isn't just a science fiction series, it's a warning, a mirror, a question mark. At the beginning of the video, we talked about a bust, about fake mind maps. Phrenology was just one of the fake sciences that tried to reduce the human mind to simple charts. Today, we have far more advanced tools. fMRI scanners, EEG devices, emotion analysis with AI, huge data sets, social network graphs. Now they're not just looking at our skulls, they're looking at our fingerprints, our pupils, our click history, how long we watch something, and step by step, we're moving toward this point. The human mind has been mapped. If it's mapped, it can be optimized. If it can be optimized, it can be managed. If it can be managed, it can be standardized. What Pluribus reminds us of is this: trying to standardize the human being is turning them into a machine. Trying to perfect every emotion is erasing the human. Maybe that's why we need characters like Carol, grumpy, unhappy, cynical, angry, but still free enough to say, "This is how I feel, and this feeling belongs to me." If one day we're all forced to live with the same emotion, just like in Pluribus, maybe the greatest rebellion in human history will begin with a sentence like this: "No, today I don't want to be happy." And that too is part of being human,